Hi, hello everyone. My name is Sasha Bernier. I'm a founder partner of Hestia Holdings. It's an investment firm that my good friend Mike Preble and I founded about a year and a half ago, actually, focused on finding niche and emerging people to invest in and who we believe are talented. We want to help those people get their word out there and what they're doing. So we're excited to be doing our first podcast. I was very fortunate about a year and a half ago to have met Madeline, who is very passionate about the arts. We was never really was exposed to it until I met Madeline, so I'm excited to have her. And interesting enough, Madeline, I'm actually in Lithuania today and visited a castle in a place called Trakai, which has very, very interesting artwork from Turkey, actually. So it's really interesting to see how like art just intersects everything. So would love you to talk about just your journey. How did you fall in love with the space of just being in art?
Yeah, to that point, I think you could say that art's the oldest investment, right? Like when you look back throughout history, what's been prioritized, as a store of value, or what people decide to spend, their money on, it's always been art. And so I guess that kind of leads to my journey. I grew up in a family of collectors, and so every weekend as a kid, much to my chagrin, I would be at an auction or in an antique store or in a gallery or in a museum with my parents kind of dragging me all over the place. And I think then much to their chagrin, when I got to college, they thought, especially my mom is an entrepreneur, thought that I would study business or finance. And I told her I wanted to study history of art instead. And so she made me get a dual degree in finance and history of art. But basically, it's something that I've grown up around all my life. And I ended up studying the Italian Renaissance to start because I loved the history and the allegory that encompassed Renaissance art. But as I kind of progressed in my career and then through my master's, I decided that I wanted to understand more about the primary market and how that transacted and what the art that was being made today was valued at, how it was valued, and the importance of it. And so I got my appraisal certification and started appraising primary market works so that I could understand how is art valued, and very quickly learned that everyone thinks of it as an investment, whether it is or it isn't, or a portion of the balance sheet, especially if they're a collector. And I can tell you, growing up in a collecting family, that it's addictive. There's never enough to buy. And that also there's a wide range of prices that can be assigned to any one work. And if you're thinking about it as an investment, there should be an objective way to price this asset class. And you could say that it is how it's appraised today, but in reality, that's just not true. We had an experiment that we did where we gave one work to a variety of different appraisers and then came back with, I think it was 8 appraisers that came back with 8 different prices that had basically a range of basically like 2x from the first price to the last price that was assigned to that asset. What do you do with that? How do you expand that? And so I also come from a family of scientists. And so I realized very quickly that you needed to have a universal language around this asset class. And so how do you do that? And what's more universal than math? And so the goal was to make art an investable asset class to people who are in art participating as a way to gain additional exposure to the market. And then 2, to figure out how do we price this asset class in a way that is objective and not subjective, and how do we create a math-based language around the asset class. And so that's what we've been hammering down on for the better part of a decade.
Interesting. So you start off your career as an appraiser in the art world, trying to figure out how to value it. And I'm assuming that at some point, something clicks or some light bulb clicks where you decide you're going to transition. We'd love you to talk about that. You were a member of the venerated Y Combinator. So want to learn about that story. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so in graduate school, I went to Harvard for graduate school, and Harvard graduate housing is pretty abysmal unless you're at HBS. And so I answered an ad to live with 5 guys in a house off campus, like a block away from the architecture school. And it was the right price at the right time. And a couple of those guys actually ended up being part of MIT Media Lab and went on to start their own company. So very early kind of within this journey, I realized that I probably wanted to do something in tech, right? I wanted to do something in tech. I was really interested in what they were doing and how they were building that company. And so that was kind of the start of like the wheels turning of like, how do I build something in tech that can help, basically bring in a wider audience, right? Because what's more, what has more scalability than tech? And so living with them definitely kind of opened my eyes. I wish I went to MIT Media Lab instead. But from there, I also had wanted to get into art and finance, kind of combining that, undergraduate experience and degree. And there was Immigrants Fine Art Finance Bank that offered art lending. And there were a couple of corporate collections in banking, and there was like one curator that was assigned to all of Deutsche Bank or all of JP Morgan. And so I also realized that even though everyone looked at art and finance as an investment or art as an asset class, that it was, essentially stifled, right, by this inability to price. And when you talk to more traditional people in banking or in finance, art's always an enigma for them. And so they're nervous, or let's call it trepidatious, to enter the asset class as an investment or create investment products around that asset class. And so what kind of clicked was that, I had this idea of how do I start a tech company, or how would I expose, kind of art to this avenue of scalability. And then also, okay, so everyone I'm talking to thinks that their asset is an investment. I know from kind of my initial job search that there's not too many jobs in art and finance. So, there's nothing that's really there. And everyone that I talk to in the financial world about art and finance points pricing and lack of transparency in pricing and transactions as the reason why they don't think there's scalability there. So how do I take my appraisal certification, my degree in finance, my experience in the art market and degrees within kind of the art market and art history, and kind of combine them? And then how do I make that scalable? And so when the Jobs Act, Arthena started as a Jobs Act platform. So before Masterworks and all of these guys, we were the first investment platform for tangible assets. And we were close with the AngelList team when it started. And basically we're like, okay, so what you're doing with AngelList Syndicates, and AngelList Syndicates is a platform where VCs and investors can co-share in their deal flow. I was like, that's a great idea. Oh my God. Sorry guys, technical difficulties at the office this morning. Right. But they can share in their access and deal flow. So, why don't we take that and then take art market experts, right? And so appraisers and or dealers, and give them the same opportunity, where we'll bring on some investors onto the platform, and then they bring on, just like AngelList, their network, and then they co-invest in deals together. And so in theory, that was a great idea. In reality, it didn't work so well, because art advisors and appraisers, they're an interesting bunch. And so they didn't want to share in their deal flow. They didn't want to share in their exposure. They were nervous about exposing the deals on a platform, instead of like AngelList, where we would be acting like a double-sided marketplace, pairing investors with, let's call them curators. We call the fund managers curators. They thought that the fund managers all thought they were working together. So we got a lot of feedback about, like, if this guy's on this platform, then, I'm not working with that guy. It's like, you're not working with that guy. You're using pipes and plumbing that we've put together that allow you to share in deal flow. And so also, while we had been building that platform, we also started making data a core focus and pricing a core focus, so that hypothetically with the funds, and we did launch a few funds, you would have the ability to also better understand your investment. And there would be all this kind of like data and education that would come with that pairing. And what we ended up building instead was a very powerful data pipeline that would allow us to quantitatively price these assets efficiently and at scale and with a very clean database. And so Foundation Capital was our first money in. And when I went to them, they were like, we don't know if this is going to work, but we like you. So we know you'll figure something out. And so we went back to them after. We were like, okay, so AngelList syndicates for the art market, maybe not the best idea. However, we now have this very powerful pricing engine and this very clean data that we've built. So, you know, what do we do? And the idea was for us to go through Y Combinator. We should apply to go through Y Combinator. And so we did. I thought I was with a bunch of like rock star celebrities when I met like the whole YC team. I was so nervous just because, you know, I had been just like so many people in the startup realm, such a fan. And we got to, we were part of YC Winter 2017, moved out to Palo Alto, and we got to work with a bunch of really incredible YC partners, but we're in Sam Altman's group. And so he was our group partner, which was, you know, incredibly exciting and little known fact, he has an art collection. And so it allowed us to really break down, okay, so we have this very powerful ability to price these assets at scale, right? So we've created this math-based language, going back to like, what are the things that we want to do to help open this asset class, this math-based language around this asset class. And so what do we do with it? And then we kind of sat back and said, okay, so, you know, funds are interesting. Art funds have existed for a long time. I actually taught part of a class at the Sotheby's Institute on art and finance, specifically focused around art funds and data. And so art funds have literally existed for over 100 years. But what are products, if we're really looking to, you know, help give exposure to art as an asset class in art and finance, what are products that would have a faster feedback loop? So you're not just buying and holding on to something, but you have a faster feedback loop with your models and a faster deployment cycle. And so very quickly we identified, and we've been following this market for a while, guarantees. So auction guarantees are when the auction house literally takes the risk of a work selling on their balance sheet. And then a third party guarantee is when a third party comes in and then buys that risk from the auction house. And consigners like it because when they bring their work up for auction, there's a guarantee that the work sells, because 30% of the time, and that's an average across the departments, when works come up for market or for sale, they don't actually sell. And so 30% of the time you could take your work to market and then actually end up not transacting and taking that work back. And so a lot of people want a guarantee that if they bring their work to market, it'll sell. And the big problem there is that the product hadn't been institutionalized, and that you know, auction houses want to offer way more risk than they can afford to have, or they have the access to balance sheet for. And so Arthena.
Hey, Matt, a quick question about that though. So a lot of people think, when they think Sotheby's, they think Christie's, they think that these art houses have so much money and can afford to do that. Is that just a myth? And can you explain that a little bit?
Auction houses are incredibly expensive businesses to run. And so it's like a lot of luxury goods, right? Like you've got a couple of super PACs, but in reality, they're not making as much money as you think they are. Right? It's a very expensive business. It's not highly scalable. And so even if you have a high volume of transactions coming through, there's a lot of client facing services that have to take place, and it's a very bespoke business. And so even though they have these big and powerful names, you know, they're not generating the revenues that you would assume that they would be, nor do they have the valuations that they would assume they would have. And I think the best way to equate this is to, you know, like football teams, like, you know, American football teams actually have a very low valuation cap. When you think about the prowess that these teams have and the recognition that these teams have and how many fans they have, you know, they're only worth a couple $2 billion. I mean, yes, it sounds like an enormous amount of money, but like when you think about the fact that there's all of these companies that you've never heard of that have market caps that are 10 or 20x, right? That's how you can kind of think of an auction house. It's a business that is very prestigious, but and has, you know, incredible name recognition. Let's call it brand recognition, because that's what it is. But, you know, they aren't, probably going to get a bunch of feedback from this later. They're not incredibly well run. I think that there's been a lot of moves to try to have them be more efficient, but you know, they're just not. And so with that comes also lack of balance sheet or lack of capital, depending on the department that they have, in order to offer, you know, these guarantees to.
Got it. Madeline, you mentioned a couple other things that I kind of want to unpack. You had mentioned that Red Y Combinator, they didn't know where their business was going. Those that invested in you really liked you. And I think it's when people meet you, I know that was my case. I could see your passion. You're obviously very smart, very sharp. You know what you're doing. What is it though? Because I've been tracking you and trying to work with you now for the past year. We did something together a couple months ago. And as we've been trying to expand and working with other people to expose them to what you're doing, people seem to be afraid of art. I don't get it, but what I've learned working with you in the past year is it's a very liquid market. It's bigger than people think. And people really see it as a storage of value. All things that, you know, real estate, for instance, people think of the same thing, right? I understand real estate cash flows, but there is really a deep market of people that really see art as a storage of value. So can you tell us what is it that scares people? Do you think scares people away? Because it's to me, from working with you, it seems like a safer asset class people think.
100%. And I can tell you, if you had $1 million to park in a painting or $1 million to park in a house, what one do you think has less upkeep? Right? The art. You put it in fine art storage facility, and you know, you revisit it when you want to, but you know, there's no active management that's happening there, and that's why it really is an excellent store of value. I think it goes back to this subjectivity that happens in pricing, right? I think it's and the art market likes it like that. They like being connoisseurs and having what they call connoisseurship, and that connoisseurship dictating pricing and dictating expertise. And you know, you can't grow that way. It's like you can't grow. The ivory tower can't grow. It's just a tower. So I think that it's really boils down to that. It's like, and that's what it boils down to with creating that math-based language that's universal. Because if you know, for instance, you know, if you walk into a gallery and you want to buy something and you ask if it's available, and then you ask what the price is, even if you can afford it, frequently the gallery is going to tell you, you know, no, or who are you? Or like, tell me about the rest of the work in your collection. Maybe you don't have any other work in your collection, but you just want to buy that work to get started. And so there's a barrier to entry, whether it's real or perceived. And so I think that perception of the barrier inhibits a lot of people from actually actively participating, which is why I think you see like the watch market or the car market or the luxury good market or the wine market thrive. And the art market's huge, but have a wider audience of people that want to participate, or not that want to participate, that are participating than you see in the art market that inhibits that entry. But in reality, if you have enough data and the market's deep enough and the market's liquid enough, you're just looking at a green field that you can deploy capital into. And so, you know, with our data pipeline, we can firmly say that, and based on a lot of comparison, that our data is the cleanest in the market. And then with that, we have a proprietary modeling environment that we've built that allows us to very quickly A/B test models, depending on the different contexts that we're deploying capital into or using them for. And that allows us to very quickly build models that we know are good. And they're good because we know we spend a lot of time cleaning and building that database and making sure that it's structured in a way that allows it to kind of flow in through that data pipeline and then price these assets well, and then create investment memos for each asset that we're looking at that are akin to any other investment memo that you'd be, you know, looking at for any other asset class. You know, maybe even a little bit more robust than what you'd see for a traditional real estate investment. And so our hope there, and with that, is that when you're looking at one of these memos and you're looking at this data, that you then feel comfortable because you have good information at hand that allows you to make an informed decision. And I think that barrier of information that happens in the art world is what prevents people from diving in, or creates that perception that maybe it's not as deep of a market as we think it is.
Yes, I mean, Madeline, so we were involved with you in one of the auction houses back in June. We were excited because you were spot on, and we were excited that we were able to work with you on that project. And so would love you to talk about just your company, because we are Hestia Holdings will be investing in your Series A. So tell the world, what is your company about? What you guys are doing, and where you see it going?
So I think, okay, so how do I want to structure this argument here? But basically, there's 1.5 trillion assets that are currently being held on balance sheet by high net worth and ultra high net worth investors in art assets, right? So not even museum collections, just personal collections. $1.5 trillion that you could create products and structure around that would allow for means of liquidity and creating cash flows that don't exist today, right? It's just being held and displayed in kind of a buy and hold fashion. And then two, I think as high net worth investors continue to grow in both size and volume, they're going to look for investments that have inherent scarcity of resource. And as they look for investments that have inherent scarcity of resource, they're continuing to turn towards the art market, which is creating additional volume in transaction and value of transactions. So the way to look at that is, okay, so you have this huge market that's primed to grow and continuing to grow. And what are the products that you can create around it that are financial products that allow it to scale? So going back to that kind of argument of scale, how do you scale things, make things efficient, make things expeditious? And you need tech to do that. And then with that, art market data is, in kind of because of this connoisseurship and inefficiency that we already talked about, is lumpy, disparate, and sparse. And so, and dirty, and very, very dirty. You could have one auction house label the same artist multiple different ways. So like you could have Pablo Picasso listed as P Picasso, P dot Picasso, P space Picasso, Picasso, and you could either have them listed as French or Spanish. And these are, we'll not call them errors, but let's call them discrepancies that we've seen within this data. And so if you're just pulling from an open API and trying to price something without spending time structuring or cleaning that data, you're going to have absolute garbage output. And what can you build or do with absolute garbage output? Nothing good. What's that old adage? It's all models are wrong. Some models are right sometimes. That's like one of those tenets that you always hear within machine learning. And so
or garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And so, you could say, and I think I've used this so many times, my engineering team's probably sick of hearing it, but we're feeding our models 100% grass-fed, data. And so with that, we've built a data pipeline of 7 different proprietary technical products that is kind of like the core operating system of Arthena that allows us to gather, ingest, table, feature, run analysis and simulation, and ultimately report on each one of the assets that we're looking at. And going back to, I think I mentioned this proprietary modeling environment, depending on the different financial product that we're looking to build, we can very quickly A/B test the models and see, what's the most accurate model, or margin of error, what has the lowest margin of error depending on the context. And then also through model inference, even though we're working within an ML context, we're able to understand what features out of the 100 different features we layer on top of those 4.5 million past sales results yields the highest gain or return on that model accuracy. And so what is Arthena? So Arthena is a, I guess you could say, quantitative investment and research firm that allows us to gather, ingest, table, feature, analysis and simulation, and report on each asset that we're looking at, and then create a variety of different financial instruments that we can deploy into based on this ability to process data at scale, have clean data, and then price this data well. And well, one of the products that we're working on is guarantees. But where I see the market going is with that $1.5 trillion of art assets that are currently locked up, and with this market that's primed to grow based on this need of investment that has scarcity of resource, there's just a wide context of, oh, and there's our VP of software engineering that's using his hands a lot in the background. Conrad's probably talking about something good. But there's a lot of different products that you can create and build, and there's a lot of different investment opportunities that you can create and build. And so guarantees are one of them. We're working on a product with the Lloyd's marketplace right now, where we're looking at how do you underwrite a work of art dropping in value or prevent it from dropping in value, dynamically priced damage and loss policies. We've had a couple of, let's call them very large tech firms that have asked us to help build out, like an ETF-like product for them based on our ability to price work and then scale these models. And so I'd say where Arthena is going is that we have this very powerful operating system that's the core of the company. And there's, a plethora of different applications that you could build off of that. It allows that market to expand and grow, and also unlock liquidity on that $1.5 trillion worth of held art assets.
Awesome. You mentioned every company is built off the team. Can you talk really quick about your team and who that team is? You pointed to your engineer, and love you to talk a little bit about the team.
So we're in the process of going fully remote, at least for a little bit. So our office is, if anyone wants a chair, you can come to 247 Center Street and come pick one up in the next 24 hours. We're 80% engineering. So I think that one mistake a lot of teams make, especially when they want to build a tech company, is that they think they can hire these outside engineering teams. And sometimes that works, but in reality, if you want to be a tech company, and this is just my stance, and maybe it's controversial, you need to have a technical team, right? And you need to have a technical team that's adept at building what you need to build. And so we have a very mature engineering team that's, core competency is ML and data science. They're also very competent within, I guess you'd say, Web3 applications as well. And so with that, we can build anything that we want to build within that realm and within that space. And I think it's really important for anyone who's starting a company today, especially if it's a tech company, that you hire an internal engineering team. You need that symbiosis that you don't necessarily get when you have an external team. And then the rest of the team has, I guess I'd say, pretty traditional experience across either the art market or the financial market. And then also that's what encompasses our board as well.
Awesome. Madeline, it's really rare to find women who are founders and who go through the journey that you're going through. Is there any advice you want to share with other women who are out there who become entrepreneurs, that you can talk about anything you've learned or lessons that you want to inspire other women out there?
You can also hear my 4-month-old in the background because I didn't take any, I took literally a week of maternity leave. So I've been driving her into the office. So I have 2 kids too. And I think, when I started on this journey, I really didn't think there was any disparity in being a woman or being a man in tech and in finance. And I think that I've now learned over the years that that's not true. There definitely is one. I think the market's working really hard to try to even things out, but it's definitely not there yet. But I'd say that the one thing that I tell myself before I walk into a meeting is I never contextualize myself into anything but me. And how do I further elaborate on that? I don't think of myself as a woman when I walk into a meeting. And I think for other women, that's important to do too. I mean, definitely bring that, energy and that chutzpah with you, but don't box yourself into a category as you're walking into a meeting. If you have a good idea and you have, the requisite tools to build and problem solve the idea into a company that you believe will be, valuable for everyone, then you've got the same thing that everybody else has that, you know, is building something that's interesting and good. And so, you know, just lead with that. And then I think also, I have a bunch of friends that started a lot of beauty companies that are in the tech space. And I'd say that just have your numbers, you know, I think you need to make sure, even, you know, honestly, as a woman, you need to make sure that you understand your numbers, you understand the numbers about your business and the market that you're catering to or building a company in twice as much as everybody else. But you've got it. If you think that you can go build a company, which is a tech company, which I think is one of the hardest things you could do. And I come from a family of industrialists. So I think building a financial firm is harder than building a railroad, honestly, at this point. You know, getting the numbers right in your presentation should be the first thing that you can do, the easiest thing that you can do. And then just go for it. But I think like that's definitely the one piece of advice. I never can try to contextualize or box myself into a category before I walk into a pitch. I just think of my company as my category, and that's what I'm selling.
Well, Madeline, this was excellent. I'm really excited to go on this journey with you. You know, if anyone wants to learn more about Arthena, please reach out to me or reach out to Madeline. She's doing some amazing stuff. We are excited to see where the road takes her. Madeline, do you want to add anything, or just they can reach out to you also, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Check out you know, arthena.com. It's spelled like Athena, but with an art in the beginning of it, ARTHENA. And you know, and definitely check out our intelligence reports. A lot of this research that we do internally for us to contextualize the market, we're now starting to share publicly. And so definitely, you know, if you want to dip your toe in the water and learn a little bit more about the market and feel like you have that connoisseurship, you can start there. And Sasha, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today and, you know, include me in this series. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I had to find a little cafe here in Lithuania, so I was rushing from another meeting, so I apologize, but thank you for taking the time and look forward to it. Thanks, Madeline. Talk soon. Okay, bye.